Tell me about how you first came to San Miguel and how you discovered it.
I came to San Miguel on the GI Bill. I was a control tower operator during the war. And afterwards, I went to the American Academy of Art in Chicago. And after I graduated, a friend of mine who was there told me about San Miguel, that he was going on the GI Bill. So I decided to go also. And that's how I came to San Miguel.
What were your first impressions?
I didn't like it because I had, well, it's a long story. I took the train down from Union Station. My friend was supposed to go down with me. His mother and my mother were there at the station. He never showed up. And so I took off on this long trip by myself. And I was not happy about it. And when I got to Nuevo Laredo, or to Laredo, I found out that my trunk, things that I had sent ahead of time, had not arrived. So I had to stay in Laredo for almost a week until the border passenger agent, who also asked me to marry him, said that it had been, my things had been there all the time.
I see.
So then he put me on the train in Nuevo Laredo to go to San Miguel. The train left at midnight from Nuevo Laredo. And I got into San Miguel about 1 o'clock in the morning the next night. And I was left with all of my things about, half a mile from the station because the Pullman didn't stop exactly at the station. And it was just deserted, and I finally got, there was a taxi cab, I believe, one of the 3 that were in San Miguel. And they took me to the hotel that I was going to stay at.
Mm-hmm.
And the town was like a ghost town. It was, all the buildings looked white in the moonlight. Didn't see anybody on the streets, no animals, nothing. And we got to the center of the town, and the hotel that I stayed at was the Hotel San Miguel, which today does not exist, but it was right in the center of town. And it was a big, big door, and I knocked, and I was there with all of my luggage. And this man opened the door, and he had a sombrero down to his eyes and a blanket covering his nose, so all you could see was a slit of his eyes. And I decided that this was not fun. I wanted to go back to Chicago. And the next day, my friend arrived. He had missed the train and taken the plane, and so now he was going to show me around San Miguel. And from then on, of course, I gradually got to really love the town.
Okay, let's stop for a minute. How many years has it been since you first arrived?
Well, I arrived in June, the middle of June of 1947. So that's about, going on 63 years. In June, it'll be 63 years.
Wow.
And I hate to say how long I've been here now. But anyway, it's been a great life.
And can you describe the town as it was then? Friendships and interactions with the local population. There were very few gringos here at that time. Is that true?
The town at that time was quite small. It was 3 blocks in each direction. It was just the very center of town. And it was just countryside around it. And we were a small group, Some people say we were 200. I don't think we were 200 GIs. We were about, I would say, 125 GIs. And there was a nice spirit between us. I didn't know everybody, but we made friends, some good friends, who were our friends for a long time. And with the townspeople, we did not have that much interrelationship. We were mostly at the school, which was at Bellas Artes, right here in the center of town. And the thing was that we really loved the type of life. We became very, very used to the way we lived. It was very primitive. We had hardly any telephones. If you wanted to to talk to a friend or see if somebody was at their house, you had to send a little boy with a note. And we cooked on charcoal lots of the times. There were very few refrigerators, bathrooms. There were mostly, in the early days, 3-holers or something like that. So it was primitive, but we enjoyed it. We really did.
And how did you meet your husband? Was he a San Miguelense?
I met my husband. It's sort of funny. We did have a bowling alley in San Miguel, and it was at the Club Social Deportivo, which had two bowling alleys, and then it had a big salon where lots of the townspeople played cards in the evening, and most of the social activities took place there. They also had, it was really the fronton club, because frontenes, they played front tennis there. They had the big court. And I bowled. I was taught to bowl by my father as a young girl. And we had a bowling tournament, and I was on the Bellas Artes team. And my husband-to-be was on the San Miguel team. And I thought he was sort of cute. And I guess he liked me, and so we became friends and eventually got married. And we've been married, and we're still married.
Wow.
It's been almost 62 years. 61. And in September it'll be 62.
That's so amazing. I wonder if I could ask you again to say that you came in 1947, because there was a little
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
some kind of sound. Okay.
All right.
So again, how long have you been here?
I've been here since 1947. I came in the middle of June 1947.
And how long has it been?
Well, it'll be 63 years in June of this year.
Wow. Okay, so then expats began to arrive in the city, is that right? Slowly.
People, some of the GIs, the school was disbanded about two years later. And I got married in 1948, September of 1948. And I think in the middle of the 50s, of the 50s, people gradually started hearing about San Miguel from the GIs that had been here, from some publicity occasionally. And so little by little through the years, San Miguel started to become quite popular. But in the early years, the 50s, the 60s, there weren't many foreigners here. And the town was very, very Mexican. Very Mexican.
How do you mean?
It was Mexican because I would say the foreigners made up a very small part of San Miguel. San Miguel had a society. There were quite a few very important families living here.
Yes.
Lots of them were from Spanish descent, and they were very well off. They had big ranches here, and they were considered the top of society here in San Miguel. And at that time, they really didn't want to have much to do with the foreigners. I think the only time, the time that they would have something to do, if it were business or something like that. Socially, there wasn't too much intercommunication. I was in the position of marrying a Mexican man who was born in the town, whose family was known, and I became part of the Mexican society. This was a bit unusual in those days, and I still have all of my good friends that I have known all of these years.
Was there opposition to the marriage from the family?
When Pepe and I got married, it was just people thought it was sort of strange. I think I had to live down a rather independent gringa's life before. I had to become a good Mexican señora, and I did that. I changed my life. I had 5 children in 7 years, and all of my Mexican friends also were having children practically every year. So our children were friends, and they still are friends to this day, even though so many of them have gone away. They've gone to school, either in the States or in Europe, and so on and so forth. When they come back to San Miguel, they're still friends, which is great. It really is.
You said before that after the initial group in the 50s, people came here who tended to have some money, the foreigners, but didn't throw it around. They were here. What were their motivations, do you think, for coming to San Miguel?
The people that came to San Miguel little by little, so many of them were people who were very well off, but were looking for a little different life, even if it was their second house, even if they didn't live here permanently, although some did. They just loved the type of life there was in San Miguel. They loved the feeling at that time that you were in a different world, that you had nothing to do with the States. And it was a foreign language, and not many people really, really learned Spanish, which is something that we've criticized through the years. But these people who were very interested in the town, helped form many of the charitable organizations, and they just wanted to become part of the town. And now things have changed a bit. The town has grown and there are so many people that are coming. So many of them are looking for an investment rather than a great place to live. Of course, we do have people that still come that love San Miguel, but the majority of people, one of my businesses is real estate. And before, we never had any problem with, can I rent this house? How much will this house be worth in a few years? So on and so forth. But now, everybody is looking for an investment rather than a place to live, for years and years. So we found that difference.
They're flipping houses. So, can you identify a time when it shifted, or was it just a gradual thing?
San Miguel, through the years, it's all been very, very gradual as to how the town has grown. And I would say the 50s, of course, it was very primitive. The 60s, we began to become a little more civilized, and people started coming to San Miguel. Then in the 70s more, and the town started growing quite a bit in the 70s and the 80s. But I think the main years have been starting the 90s and through, I say the last 20 years is when you see the most change in San Miguel. People have built houses where we never thought a house could be built. And the countryside that before were big ranches and you'd see just stretches of country have become developments. And many of us who have lived here for a lot of years, we felt a lot of nostalgia for the old times. And but supposedly this is progress.
You were talking before about these last 6 or 7 years or so when you said that there's been a change in a way for the worse around development policies. Could you say something about that?
Through the years, some of us have always been very civically minded. We've cared a lot what has happened to the town. And I'd say in the beginning, probably the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s, we had a commission which was to protect the patrimony of San Miguel. And we worked very hard to see that the houses that were built conformed to the regulations, that the streets were not paved with cement, but would be with the stones that we've always used in San Miguel. And we had problems. We had a lot of problems because it depended on the administration. And sometimes you would have a good administration. The mayor would have a period of 3 years. He could be re-elected after a certain time. Most of them were not re-elected. Occasionally there was one. The last 6 years, we experienced 2 administrations that were very difficult. And we all say that in those 6 years, they changed San Miguel so much. And we have a group called Va por San Miguel, Go with San Miguel. That we've been trying to stop some of the things that the administration has been doing. They've been giving permits for developments all around without taking into consideration the infrastructure, where these developments should be. They were looking really they were doing this for economic reasons and not necessarily doing it to help the town. And our group has been all of this time trying to stop some of this, all of these permissions that they've been giving to the developers. And of course, you can't stop this, but you can do it with a plan. You can take in consideration the ecology, the city planning, the infrastructure of the town. And we're hoping with this new administration, which, by the way, the mayor is a woman, the first time a woman has been mayor of San Miguel. We're hoping that this administration will be more considerate of the town. And we have a feeling that we are going to be able to work together.
Mm-hmm. I heard that you went off, I'll change the subject a little bit. I heard that you went off bullfighting at one point in time. Just tell me something about that.
When I first came to San Miguel, I've always loved horses and I've always ridden since I was a little girl. And of course, when I first came here, I started riding and I was with the Charros and so on and so forth. And one night after we'd had a few drinks at one of the local bars in town, this is before I was married, because I never would have done this if I were married. And some of the men said, hey, you love to ride and you love horses and you love all of it. What about being in the bullfight tomorrow? And I said, what do you mean? They said, you could pick, and you could be the picadora. And I had no idea, really. I mean, I'd seen some bullfights, but I was certainly, I didn't even know what I would have to do. Mm-hmm. But I think I'd had a few drinks. And I said, okay, sure, but tell me what I have to do. So they managed to get me what we call a traje corto. They borrowed it from one of the women in town. It's a short black jacket, a white shirt, black tight pants and boots, and a flat Spanish sombrero. Mm-hmm. And they said, all right, meet us there in front of the bull ring, which is right in the middle of town, and at 3 o'clock. Already dressed and so on and so forth. So I got there and I was sort of feeling a little bit nervous. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I got and I saw my steed that I was to ride. And I said, oh my God. And of course, he's an older horse, not very good looking. And he was protected from the horns of the bull, and his eyes, one of his eyes, he had something over his eye so he wouldn't see the bull. And I got on him, and they gave me the pick, which we call the garrocha. And in the bullfight, it seems like it's so light because the men, generally the picadores, are big, heavy, strong men. And when they gave me the garrocha, it was so heavy. It was so heavy. I didn't know if I was going to be able to hold on to it. It's quite long. It's about, 5 feet long, more or less, with a pick at the end. And they just told me, they said, now, when it's time for you to go in, you just, you turn to the right, and you stand there, and you wait for the bull to come to you. May I say, these were not full-grown bulls. Mm-hmm. They were probably about 1.5 years, something like that. And they said, do not go to the center of the ring. Wait until the peon or the torero brings the bull to the horse with the capote. And so I was waiting for the bull to be brought to me. He wouldn't come. So I edged a little further towards the middle of the ring, thinking I could capture his attention. And he still wouldn't come. So I found myself where I shouldn't have been, in the middle of the ring. And finally, the bull came to me. And I did a pretty good job. So after that, we went to quite a few of the bullfights, mostly ferias, which means that, you know, it's on festival day, so on and so forth. And I did that for, oh gosh, going on almost almost a year, more or less.
Wow.
And they gave me a name, an official name called La Coneja, because they said that means the rabbit. But they said that the best picador of all times was called El Conejo. So that was, you know, it was quite an honor to be called La Coneja.
Right.
When I was going to get married, my father-in-law asked me, he said, Güera, they always called me Güera, which was blonde. Do you plan on keeping your bullfighting after you're married? He was very worried because nice women in those days did not do that. And I said, no, Don Miguel, no, I'm not. So he was very much relieved.
Let's shift gears again.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of advice would you give to people coming to this community now in terms of dealing with a new culture? Since the nature of the person that comes to settle here has changed a bit, what would you tell somebody if they asked you in terms of settling in?
Well, you know, if somebody comes to San Miguel now and they ask me, what will their life be like here, and so on and so forth. Now is not that much different from the States as it used to be. It used to be like you were going into a different century. Now we're all in the 21st century. And lots of the people that come here, of course, want all the comforts of home. And whatever house they buy or they rent, they want everything. And they want, you know, their computer, they want everything. The life here, how should I say, it is not as Mexican as it used to be. There are a lot of foreigners here. You can get along really without speaking Spanish. So many of the foreigners are seeking to be not only with their own. There isn't that much mixing with the Mexicans. And lots of the foreigners have businesses here also. So I think, to my mind, I mean, we have all of the conveniences now, really, that we never had before. And it isn't quite as Mexican as it used to be. We're a sophisticated town now. We're quite sophisticated. We have people from all over the world, people who have been quite famous or who are quite famous or well known, and people who have done many different things, who have been experts in their field. And sure, some of these people have joined some of the organizations here and given their input and tried to help, which has been great. But the town is still much more Americanized now than it used to be.
What do you think remains of what first drew you to the town? What aspects, what things?
Well, let me see, I don't
Don't understand the question. I mean, what's the best of what you loved about the place and made you stay and spend your whole life here? What's still there? What's still there?
In spite of the fact that what I'm saying is it isn't quite as Mexican as it used to be, it isn't quite as traditional as it used to be, it's still a wonderful place to live. It's, first of all, the weather is wonderful. We have, like today, a few cold days, but generally when the sun comes out in the wintertime, you can even swim and sunbathe. All year round, it's really a great temperature. And of course, we have people that work in our homes, which is great, which we are very pleased to be able to have people that help us, for example, our cooks and our gardeners and so on and so forth. And the people that you meet here are generally very interesting, and we've met lots of very, very nice people through the years. We've had many good friends. Another thing is that many things are not quite as expensive as they would be in the States or in Europe. To belong to the golf club, for example, to do any of your sports, I think you will find it much less expensive than any place else. And the type of life that we lead is really an indoor-outdoor life. We spend a lot of time outdoors. Most of our houses have patios or loges, and lots of the entertaining is done outside. We just love this type of life. I remember when I first got here, I had always lived in an apartment building in Chicago. And after living here, having my own house and living here for a year, if I had to go to Mexico City and stay in a hotel, I felt closed in, because we were so used to having the informality of our life, which is really great here. And you never had to worry about wearing designer clothes. In the early days, I must say, in the early days when I was more or less bringing up my children, and in my Mexican society era, we dressed up. We really did. And we wore high heels. And people say today, how in the world could you get along on these streets in the high heels? But we did. And things have gotten a lot more casual. A lot more casual. Well, I guess they have all over the world, but here especially.
Can you tell me anything about Sterling Dickinson? You knew him, didn't you?
Oh, Sterling. You asked me about Sterling. Sterling was a wonderful guy. He happened to live not too far from us in Chicago. I didn't know him at that time, but when I was first coming down here, we corresponded, and he wrote a beautiful letter. It was wonderful. Then when I came down and met him, I found out that he was really quite a shy person. He was tall and thin, and he just loved San Miguel. He loved everything. And we had a very good relationship from the first time on. And the first winter I was here, we went on a trip down to Chiapas. This is in 1947, when they were just making the Pan American Highway. And it was a fabulous trip. 4 of us went. And I can't go into everything on that trip, but he was a great collector of orchids. And that was one of the reasons for making the trip. And Sterling was a person, he did so many things for the people. He loved baseball, and he had his baseball team. He had a group of men, and he helped them all the time. He would try to get them jobs and so on and so forth. And they were Sterling's baseball team. And I remember some friends of ours from Chicago, the Adams family, also were friends of Sterling's. And they bought a house. We sold it to them. They bought a house, but they had to redo it. So Sterling said, well, my baseball guys don't have anything to do at the time. They'll build your house. So they built, the Sterling sort of supervised. Well, let me tell you, when they had the inauguration of the house, they had a little cocktail party. I have pictures. We were in the house, it was raining out, and we were in the house with the umbrellas because the house leaked all over. But that was fun. And Sterling had a wonderful place called Los Pocitos in the upper part of town where he had his orchid collection. And anybody, he was open for people to see his orchid collection, which was quite amazing, it really was. Then he helped with the library. He would take books to the communities that were far away, and he did wonderful things here. He really did. Then, of course, he was the head of the Bellas Artes when I first came, although he wasn't the owner of the school, but he was sort of the head of the art department. And then when Bellas Artes closed and the Instituto Allende opened, he was the director. And he was the director for many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I did a lot of riding, and I did a lot of golf, and I did a lot of... But we don't have to mention things.